Hey, it's not a barely, it's a quorum. No, I took one on the way. All right. Good evening, everybody. If I'd like to thank and welcome Chief Austin to lead us in our invocation tonight.
Mayor, let us pray. Dear wise and loving Father, we pray your blessings upon this meeting and all those gathered here today. We thank you for the opportunity to care for this beautiful community we call Milton. And Father, we pray your special blessing upon this time as we pause and take time to remember and reflect the tragic events of 9/11, the day that forever changed our nation. We remember those who lost their lives in the attacks, as well as the countless first responders and citizens who risked their lives and even gave the ultimate sacrifice, saving the lives of others. We also remember the bereaved and mourning families that lost loved ones on that horrific day, and we pray your holy comfort for them. Father, during this time together, as we go about the business of this city, we pray for our elected officials, our city staff, and the community members that we serve. We pray that you give us all a sense of wisdom, fairness, and justice as we all work together to be good stewards of this great community in which you have entrusted us. It's in your most blessed name that we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Chief Austin. I'd like to call the regular meeting of the Milton City Council for Monday, September 8th, 2021 to order. The city strongly recommends that you review tonight's agenda carefully, and if you wish to speak on any item on the agenda, then please bring your comment card to the clerk as soon as possible, or the Milton rules allow a speaker to turn in the comment card up until the clerk calls the agenda item. Once the agenda item is called, no more comment cards can be accepted. Will the city clerk please call the roll and make general announcements?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'll be happy to call roll for the September 8th, 2021 regular meeting. I would like to remind those in attendance to please silence all cell phones at this time. Those attending the meeting who would like to make a public comment, you are required to complete a public comment card prior to speaking on the item. Your comment card must be presented to the city clerk prior to the agenda item being called. All speakers, please identify yourself by name, address, and organization before beginning your comment. If you are representing an organization, an affidavit is required stating you have the authority to speak on behalf of that organization. Please review tonight's agenda, and if you would like to make a comment, please bring your comment card to me now. Demonstration of any sort within the chamber is prohibited. Please refrain from any applause, cheering, booing, outburst, or dialogue with any one person speaking. Anyone in violation will be asked to leave. As I call roll this evening, please confirm your attendance. Mayor Joe Lockwood.
Here.
Councilmember Peyton Jamison.
Here.
Councilmember Carol Cookerly.
Here.
Councilmember Joe Longoria.
Here.
Councilmember Rick Morrig is running late tonight, and absent are Councilmember Moore and Councilmember Laura Bentley. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Oh, I just.
Whoops.
Wait, just-
Halt. Left. Face. Present colors.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Order colors. About face. Post colors. Right face. Forward march.
Thank you to our color guard tonight. Record, Councilmember Bentley is here.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll make that record. I want to welcome everybody here tonight.
get started, I certainly want to say that I'm sure I'm speaking for all of council and our staff and our citizens, and want to just be with your family in prayer and thoughts, Laura, on the loss of your mom. So, also want to, on a good note, want to congratulations to Sarah Leaders on your promotion to community development, not community development, but public works director. So we're glad to have you on board there. So, and also Jan, did you say Jacobus? Jacobus. Sorry. Want to congratulate Jan on being our new city council member. So welcome to. Obviously, you've been involved, but welcome to your new position come January 1st, and we'll certainly be there to support you. So thanks for stepping up. And City Clerk will please call the next item.
That, Mayor, item is approval of meeting agenda, agenda item number 21253. Mayor?
Okay. I do want to add an executive session to discuss land acquisition, potential litigation, and personnel. Is there anything else on the agenda anybody wants to change? Okay, I'll open up for a motion.
Mayor, I move that we approve the meeting agenda with the addition of a executive session for land acquisition, potential litigation, and personnel.
Okay, I have a motion from Councilmember Longoria,
Second.
and I have a second from Councilmember Bentley. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous. All right, Tammy, do we have any general public comment tonight?
I do not have any, sir.
Okay. So I'll move on to the consent agenda. If City Clerk will please sound those items.
Mayor, those items are first, approval of the July 19th, 2021 City Council meeting minutes, agenda item number 21254. Our second item is approval of the August 16th, 2021 City Council meeting minutes, agenda item number 21255. Our third item, approval of the financial statements and investment report for period 10, July 2021, agenda item number 21256. Our next item, approval of a professional services agreement with Practical Designs Partners, LLC for State Route 140, Arnhem Mill Road at Green Road intersection survey. Agenda item number 21257. Our fifth item, approval of a professional services agreement with Practical Design Partners, LLC for State Route 372, Crabapple Road at Green Road intersection survey. Agenda item number 21258. Our next item, approval of an agreement between the City of Milton and Premier Collision Center, Inc. for automobile body repair services. Agenda item number 21259. Our seventh item, approval of an agreement for outside providers and facility use agreement between the City of Milton and GG Leagues, Inc. to provide online gaming leagues for youth and adults. It's agenda item number 21260. Our next item, approval of a purchase agreement with 10-8 Fire and Safety LLC for the purchase of a rescue ambulance. Agenda item number 21261. Our ninth item, approval of a change order with Granicus SAAS LLC to make improvements to the homepage of the City of Milton's website. Agenda item number 21262. Our 10th item, approval of an agreement with Intradyne, Inc. to provide social media archiving services for the City of Milton. Agenda item number 21263. Our next item, approval of an intergovernmental agreement between the City of Milton and Fulton County Soil and Water Conservation District regarding the pier construction at Providence Park. Agenda item number 21264. Our next item, approval of a contract amendment to transfer assignment of a contract from Wolverton and Associates, Inc. to CHA Consulting, Inc. as a result of their recent acquisition. Agenda item number 21265. Our next item, approval of an amendment between the City of Milton and the Department of Natural Resources to amend the scope of work and extend the completion date of the Providence Park restroom agreement to March 31st, 2022. Agenda item number 21266. Our 14th item, approval of a change order number 1 to task order for BM&K PC to provide construction inspection services for the Cogburn Road Sidewalk Project. Agenda item number 21267. Our next item, approval of a change order number 1 to task order for BM&K PC to provide construction inspection services for the Hopewell Road at Thompson Road and Hopewell Road at Hamby Road intersection improvement projects. It's agenda item number 21268. Our 16th item, approval of a construction services agreement with Federal EC LLC for Oakhurst Leaf Drive stormwater pipe lining. Agenda item number 21269. Our final consent agenda item is approval of a professional services agreement with Emergency Care Medical Group PC for the provision of medical direction services for Milton Fire Rescue. It's agenda item number 21270. Mayor Lockwood.
Okay, do I have a motion on the consent agenda?
Mayor, I move that we approve the consent agenda as read.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion from Councilmember Longoria, the second from Councilmember Cookerly. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous. We'll move on to reports and presentations. Tammy, if you'll please sound the item.
Mayor, that item is proclamation recognizing National Suicide Prevention Week. Mayor?
All right. I'm here tonight to read a proclamation and present a proclamation promoting mental wellness and recognizing the National Suicide Prevention Week, which is, I'm sure most all of us have been touched in some way by mental illness and suicide. So it's certainly very important, and we want to do everything that we can moving forward to support our people and do what we can to help prevent this so in the future. So whereas the city of Milton places a high priority on mental wellness for people of all ages and types, knowing that many of our community quietly struggle with depression, anxiety, PTSD, and other mental illnesses. And whereas the National Suicide Prevention Week is an annual campaign to raise awareness among Americans, as well as engage and inform health professionals that run this year from September 5th to September 11th. And whereas this week overlaps with World Suicide Prevention Day on September 10th, which this year has a theme of creating hope through action, to encourage individuals to work together to recognize warning signs and act to help prevent suicides. Whereas suicide is the second leading cause of death among Americans aged 10 to 34, according to the CDC. And whereas research shows that talking about suicide can be critical to preventing it, so engaging people in deliberate, caring conversations and working to reduce suicide-related stigmas can save lives. Whereas the city of Milton constantly strives to provide the best quality of life for its residents by forging connections and offering ways to create a strong sense of belonging and healthy, well-informed populace. And whereas Milton is a better place when difficult topics like suicide are discussed head-on, with the community coming together to listen and support those in need. Now, therefore, we, the mayor and the city council of the city of Milton, proclaim September 5th through 11th to be Suicide Prevention Week in Milton. And we demonstrate the city's commitment to citizens' health and well-being by partnering with the LRJ Foundation on an educational campaign throughout September, sharing information, tools, resources, and our community to support mental wellness. And this is given under our hand and seal of the city of Milton, Georgia, on the 8th day of September 2021. And I think we may have some folks from LRJ, but if I can present these proclamations and if the council wants to join me.
You can go, we'll get a picture if you want to step up here.
Are you gonna count for y'all? One, two, three.
We're good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, she'll send it, yeah.
Did you get pictures or video?
What pictures?
Okay, just
Sorry.
no pictures are fine, because I think
Okay.
they may have been looking for you. Just send them to me.
Okay, I'll, I did it with her phone too. so-
Oh, I see.
And Tammy, for the record, Councilmember Morgan's here.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right, if you would please call the next item.
Mayor, the next item is proclamation recognizing the 20th anniversary of the September 11th terrorist attacks. Mayor?
Okay. You know, it's hard to believe when I just read, 20th anniversary. It just seems in some ways like, yeah, it seems like a long time ago, but just yesterday. And I think sometimes we forget when we see the high schools and the kids doing things in remembrance of 9/11, and you think they weren't even around. So, and I've heard before when people say, do you remember what you were doing? And I'm sure if you guys are like me, you just can't get that image of that when you first either heard on the news or saw some footage or whatever, what was happening, how it just sticks in your mind, and what a horrific time that was. But then also the aftermath, how terrible it was, but then seeing our country and all the heroes and everybody pulling together, and it was just heartwarming. So tonight I'm going to read, I have a proclamation remembering and recognizing the 20th anniversary of September 11th terrorist attacks. Whereas the United States and Milton were transformed forever on September 11th, 2001, exactly 20 years ago this Saturday. Whereas terrorists hijacked 4 planes that morning, with 1 striking the Pentagon, another crashing into a Pennsylvania field, and 2 hitting the World Trade Center in New York City. Whereas nearly 3,000 people died as a result of those attacks, while the lives of untold others changed forever, including those who lost loved ones, coped with fear and worry, and were spurred to enlist in the U.S. military. Whereas those in Georgia and Milton specifically were among those impacted, with some having direct ties to victims and those involved in the Ground Zero recovery effort, while many more were indirectly shaken. And whereas the lessons of 9/11 hit home, particularly for Milton firefighters and police officers, reminding us all of the types of dangerous, heroic acts that they may be called upon to do at any given shift. And whereas in Milton, we vow to never forget September 11th and its devastating impact on our country, as well as how people rallied together afterwards. And now, therefore, we, the mayor and city council, of the city of Milton, formally remember and recognize the 20th anniversary of the September 11th terrorist attacks this coming Saturday. This is given under our hand and seal of the city of Milton, Georgia, on the 8th day of September 2021. And if my council would join me and our guys in uniform, please step forward and I'll present these proclamations.
Squished together. Thank you.
Email or text these? Okay. I'm gonna have-
And I know we don't have a big crowd here tonight, but I never want to lose an opportunity to thank those in uniform. And, we all know that you guys get up every day and go to work and put us and people you don't even know, put us first, and are willing to act upon and do things that put yourself in danger over to save our citizens. So just want to thank you guys and appreciate it. All right, Tammy, please call the next item.
The next item is presentation of an update on Clarity Road Bridge, presented by Ms. Sarah Leaders.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So tonight we've got a presentation to discuss Clarity Road Bridge and some repair recommendations for the bridge. So Clarity Road Bridge spans Little River at the Cherokee and Fulton County line. It was built in 1954. The road name changes when you get into Cherokee County to AJ Land, and it provides a connection from Hickory Flat Road up to Union Hill Road. The road surface of Clarity in Milton is a gravel road, and then when you cross into Cherokee County, it becomes a paved road. The bridge is 48.5 feet long, and the width of the travel lane across the bridge is under 14 feet wide. It's a timber deck bridge. It has timber running boards for the vehicle tires to travel across, and it currently has a metal railing and a fence barrier along it. And the weight limit is posted at 5 tons. So just a little background information on the bridge. In March of this year, we got a report of some damage to the railing. And after evaluation of that damage, it was not able to be welded or reattached back together. So we closed the bridge for safety reasons. In July and August of this year, we hired Heath and Lineback engineers to help us with some inspections and repair recommendations for the bridge. So in July 13th, the consultant performed a visual inspection of the bridge and then submitted a report of their recommendations and findings for our review. Let's see. What they were looking for in those recommendations was really the most effective economical rehabilitation recommendations for the bridge. So based on those recommendations, they prepared some repair plans, and those were submitted on August 25th. And just a little bit of history too on the damage to the railing. Over the last 15 years, there have been multiple instances where that railing has been hit. It's been able to be re-welded or reattached at different times. But this latest impact with it has unattached it from the bridge, and it needs to be replaced at a minimum. Another thing to point out is in the top left picture, the concrete bollard that's supposed to help protect the railing. You can see the paint has been worn off on that. It's been hit multiple times over the years. So I wanted to go through all options associated with the future of the bridge and the cost associated with those. There's always the option to not do a no build on the repairs, but this isn't the recommended course for this bridge. The primary repair will be repairing the railing. The recommendation was to use that railing to strengthen the steel beams of the bridge. So that has a ranged cost, and this is just an estimated cost at $16,500 to $18,000. That'll depend on the treatment of the guardrail system, whether it's galvanized, painted, or it uses a reactive color treatment. Another recommendation that came out of the report was to clean the bridge deck to extend the life. It's estimated we can extend the life of that timber decking about at least 5 years for $2,000 that would cost to clean the bridge deck while it's closed. They also estimated the cost to actually replace the bridge deck, and that is estimated at over $30,000. Two other elements just associated with the approach to the bridge were to remove the vegetation about 20 feet on the approach and to reset or replace the damaged bollard. So that's $1,500 and $1,000 for those two items. Another element is to look at the approach curvature to the bridge, and I'll get into a little more detail on what that entails. And then the consultant also provided a very rough estimate of if we replaced the bridge in like kind at a similar elevation, length, width, and that estimate is around $200,000. So of all those options, this is the recommended course of repairs. To repair the railing with the guardrail system as designed at that base cost of $16,500. To use either a paint or reactive color treatment on the guardrail, that will add some cost. And if we go with the reactive color treatment, it will add some time to get that delivered. The pictures at the bottom, the one on the left is that reactive color treatment. It makes it look like a rusted type guardrail, really takes away the shininess of the galvanized. And then the picture at the right is the example of what we've done with some painted guardrails. That is at Freemanville, Providence. So we have either of those options to soften the look of the recommended guardrail system along the bridge. Recommending to go ahead and clean the bridge deck while it's closed and to reset or replace that bollard and the vegetation. So all that comes to an estimated cost of $22,500. And then I'm also recommending to move forward with at least the survey and layout of improving the radius on the Milton approach to the bridge. Like I said, the Cherokee County side is it's a very straight approach. The curvature on the Milton side is such that this alignment has caused, we believe is what's causing that damage to the railing in the first place. So recommending we at least begin with a survey and a layout. This is just a rough turning template that I put together to show what it would take to accommodate this is for a 50-foot wheelbase vehicle. So from the front tires to the back, 50 feet. And this is the turning template that would be required. There will be some cost with acquiring right-of-way to make this improvement, and then to actually reconstruct the road along this alignment. So to ultimately fix this approach is estimated at $50,000, but really, even with a replacement bridge, this would need to be looked at to improve that approach. So in summary, the damaged safety railing does need to be removed and replaced on both sides of the bridge. The recommending going with the proposed guardrail system that's going to be attached to the steel beam members. That'll help resist any impact to the railing. The timber deck will need to be replaced, but we're recommending just cleaning it at this time to at least get 5 more years of life out of it, and then begin looking at the approach curvature to correct and limit future damage. So again, the recommendations are to bid these repair recommendations and then begin the survey and layout for improving the approach. And with that, I'll take any questions or comments on these recommendations or any other recommended action to move forward with.
So a question I have, I think the number was around $30,000 with the recommended recommendations that staff has on the repair, the guardrails and railings, clean, repair, all that.
22 and a half.
Okay. Versus obviously 200,000 for a new bridge. I think basically, are you saying with the minimal repairs we're talking now that will will last about 5 years.
5 to 10 is the estimated.
So let's assume we replace the decking on it, which was what, another 30,000? 31, that's what 31 was in my head. But, if you replace the decking, let's say we did the minimal repairs now and 5 years from now, replace the decking, how much longer would the bridge last? Considerably longer?
We could have it evaluated again at that time to,
I'm just trying to justify versus a new bridge at 200,000 versus spend 21,000 now and 31 at 5 years. If it gets us the same thing. So that's
right, that could be a possibility.
That's only my question. I'm fine. I would probably, recommend the same thing of what you guys are recommended as far as the cleaning and guardrails and whatnot. But Laura?
Sarah, how many Milton residents are on the Milton side of the bridge? How many people live on our side of the bridge?
There's one driveway.
So it's one driveway. And so when I got calls about this bridge being out, everyone was on the Cherokee side. So do we do any kind of cost sharing or partnering on something like this? Because, the bridge is serving a lot of their residents as well. So,
Right. With the bridge being right on the line, the determination of the responsible jurisdiction is how the state reports the bridge inspections. So every 2 years, DOT comes and inspects all the bridges. And this one shows up on the Fulton County report. Actually, all of our shared bridges with Cherokee County are on the Fulton County report, which means we have the maintenance responsibility. I have gotten some questions from Cherokee County Engineering Department about the bridge, but they've not offered any cost sharing support, and they see it as it's our bridge to maintain.
our bridge to.
Our bridge to allow
so that-
Right.
people to drive through Milton. Joe?
So, Sarah, do we, I mean, the bridge has been closed since March. Is that correct? Okay.
Correct.
Now, I don't want to, theorize that people have gotten used to traveling some other way to get around the bridge, but that isn't a long time for the bridge to not be available for use. And you're telling us that on the Milton side of the bridge, we've got one driveway on that particular road. Now, I know the road connects to something else in Milton, so they're just going the other way right now. What is the impact? You mentioned there was an option to not repair the bridge at all and just leave it closed, but long-term, that causes problems for what?
Just the connectivity that a road like that serves. Mostly for vehicular connectivity. It has flooded once in the last 15 years that we're aware of. Every time it overtops, the state does have to come out and inspect it. It's not posing any kind of a flow issue for Little River. That would be a concern too. Is it impeding the river flow by just leaving it as it exists? So.
Was there ever any kind of a traffic analysis done? I mean, do we know how many people were using the bridge on a daily basis when it was operational?
Unfortunately, we don't. We had scheduled to do some traffic counts out there in 2020, and with the change in traffic patterns, we did not actually get it counted at that time. So.
Okay.
Laura?
I just have another comment. So, I mean, the use of the bridge by our residents and the road leading to it, I mean, I'm just having a little bit of a hard time with that. I think if you look at it, the reason the rail gets hit is when people come with big horse trailers and they try to maneuver that turn, the approach. I mean, I just don't know that the problem is going to be solved. I mean, I hate to go towards the full-blown replacement of the bridge, but I mean, we might find ourselves replacing that railing continuously because of the approach. So I don't think this is an easy answer, and I'm, I'd be interested to know the traffic counts because it's a big investment or a cut through that is, I know it provides some traffic mediation, it's pretty big expense to us.
So to that point, I think you were recommending the repairs, but then also to start assessing the realignment and then come back to us with
Correct.
something on that.
Yes.
Anybody else? And I know, easy to sit here and say, well, let's don't do anything because it's just, more traffic coming into Milton, but I do feel we have to be responsible because Roswell and Alpharetta could do the same thing to us, and so, but anyways. All right, so question would be, is council favorable to the recommendations by Sarah and her staff?
Yeah.
And then we're looking at the other stuff later. Okay.
All right.
Thanks. Tammy?
Mayor, that next item is presentation of former Milton Country Club trail construction and boardwalks, presented by Ms. Sarah Leaders.
Okay, so I wanted to start with just an update on the construction out at former Milton Country Club on the trails and the cart path removal, and then talk about some of the proposed boardwalks. So to start off the project, the first thing we do is to establish the erosion control measures throughout the site. The middle picture is a construction entrance. We have 3 of those on the project, and those are as construction vehicles enter from, this one is from the parking lot of the active area. The other is, there's one on Dinsmore Road, off of Dinsmore Road, and then there's one off Highgrove Club Drive. So it's just to be able to accommodate the construction vehicles entering and exiting the site, and to address the any mud they may be tracking would be tracked in the gravel with that construction entrance. The pictures on either side of that show an aerial view of the silt fence that has gone up. We have nearly 15,000 linear feet of silt fence on this job, and the goal of that silt fence is to protect the undisturbed areas from construction runoff from the site. The next thing we started on was the concrete cart path removal. And the picture on the bottom left is showing where that cart path was taken up in the concrete panels. Those have been staged at a couple different places on the site and are actually being crushed and will be recycled for use on the new surface trail. So the cross section here in the middle of the page just demonstrates that the new trail will have a layer of materials. They'll start with a compacted subgrade, and then they'll put down 2 inches of the crushed old cart path that'll serve as a GAB, which stands for graded aggregate base. And then on top of that, we'll come in with 6 more inches of standard GAB. And then on top of that, 4 inches of a decomposed granite material as the topping for the trail. And the picture on the bottom right just shows the equipment that's being used to crush the material. So it's great to be able to recycle that and use it on the future placing of the trail. Work's also begun on laying out and grading for the new trail and establishing access around the property. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the locations that need elevated crossings for stormwater purposes on the site. I'll start with the map on the right. You all have seen this several times. It shows the conceptual master plan and then the phase 1 trail overlaid on that. So the orange lines were the master plan as it was laid out for the trail, and then the darker black line is the phase 1 trail. So in the master plan, there were 2 identified of these raised crossing areas around the phase 1 area. As part of our design, we laid out a proposed boardwalk at location number 1, which is shown here, kind of near the cul-de-sac end of Highgrove Club Drive. And then the other location we're going to talk about tonight was identified with the hydrology study that's underway, and it identified a need for a raised type crossing at location number 2. And then the picture on the left just shows those with aerial imagery. The location number 1 is along a wet weather ditch area, and location number 2 is around that north pond. So the recommendations for how to address these 2 crossings are seen here, and I'll talk about the maps below. So first of all, at location number 1, the plans had called for a design and constructed boardwalk. The area that's shaded gray here was the location that boardwalk was laid out. It's about a 50-foot long boardwalk to cross and span this wet weather ditch drainage area. The plans also called for a temporary construction crossing for construction vehicles to be able to access the entire site. That temporary pipe crossing has already been installed, and it's shown about where this heavier blue line is. And that consists of 20 feet long of a 48-inch concrete pipe, and then it's got riprap, which is a large rock to help with slowing water down on the upstream and downstream end of that. So as we look at proposed modifications for location 1, we are proposing to continue the pipe crossing option. It actually laid out very well in the field. It feels like a natural type crossing. The slopes come in nicely, and we can either relocate that pipe crossing further away from the properties to the north of that. There are some alignment alternates that we could look at with a proposed pipe crossing here. And the proposal is to take the boardwalk that was specified in the bid and actually relocate that to location number 2, where it fits in better with along that northern lake. So location 2 is a new location. It wasn't previously identified until we started the hydrology study. And that hydrology study identified that northern lake has an emergency overflow. So if it reaches a certain elevation, it will overtop this, about the area where the boardwalk's shown, and flow into the creek. So the boardwalk would allow that ability to maintain that emergency flow underneath it and to have a raised crossing of that location. That location number 2 is within the floodplain, so we wouldn't have to do any filling to get that trail at the correct elevation. So while this is still in the construction phase condition and it's not dressed up, like I said, this is the pipe crossing that has been installed. You can see how pictures don't quite do justice of being out there, but it does flow very nicely. The proposed boardwalk at this location was about at the end of the gravel, so that's where the boardwalk would be. The pipe crossing sits about 4 feet higher, at least 4 feet higher than the boardwalk would be. So to get down to that boardwalk elevation and then to raise back up, we are still able to maintain the 5% maximum slope, but the pipe location provides for a little bit of a smoother transition through this area. So again, these are pictures of location number 1 and that existing temporary pipe crossing that has been installed. If we do go with the consideration of a pipe crossing, there are some enhancements we can make to dress it up. Not only will we stabilize all the slopes and get vegetation growing, but we could also look at using river rock in place of the standard riprap stone. On the upstream side, we could do a stone head wall around the pipe, so it's not just the end of a pipe or a concrete kind of head wall. The hydrology study has already called out a recommended vegetated or enhanced swell that could additionally screen this area. We don't have that as part of the bid, but that would be a future improvement in that area on the upstream side of this pipe crossing. And finally, we could do some 3 or 4 board type rail fencing to give it a bridge feel. So the benefits to these recommendations, at location number 1, we said have already installed that pipe crossing in a temporary form, and that for that cost, it was around $5,500. That was already part of the project, so that's already been paid for. By using a pipe, we would have no vehicle weight or capacity limitations to access the entire trail system on the North Woods. To have better vehicle access to the entire trail. Like I said, the grading could be a little flatter if we went with a pipe crossing. And it allows space for that future hydrology improvement. And then we have the options to add some aesthetic enhancements to this crossing. And of some of those enhancements I showed on the previous slide, that could add up to around $12,000. Then location number 2, the recommendation is to move the boardwalk that was already part of the bid to this location. The picture on the right is a picture that was on the material submittal from the boardwalk contractor. And the bid cost for this boardwalk was $28,000. So that is, again, that's already included in the bid as well. There would be no grading impact on the floodplain. We're able to bridge this area that's already identified as an area that tends to remain wet. Would minimize, because we're using a gravel material, by raising and using a boardwalk there, we'd minimize some washout potential. And this location, location 2, is not a critical crossing point for vehicles on the trail system. So in summary, there's no additional funds needed for these items discussed. We do have miscellaneous construction on the project, and that would easily cover the $12,000 add for the enhancements to the pipe crossing. So we're asking for input on these staff recommendations for the crossings. Again, those were to install the proposed boardwalk at location 2 instead of 1, and then use the pipe crossing with some aesthetic enhancements at location 1. And with that, I'll open it up for questions or comments on this proposed recommendation.
Can you remind me what location 2 without the boardwalk, what we originally had?
So it would just dip down a little lower and would just be an area that water would need to run across if we didn't actually raise it. So it would be an area where we'd be having to replace material or regrade. Adding a pipe there because of the flat elevation and water needing to reach the stream just wouldn't work from a slope wise for a pipe to go under that location.
So you think that is an enhancement to area number 2?
It is, yes.
Questions?
Question not directly related, but have we removed all the concrete on the course at this point in time, all from the private property also?
I believe it was almost done. Last I'd gotten an update. They had an equipment issue getting the last bit of it, but there may have only been a few hundred feet left to get if they hadn't gotten it all yet.
Okay, and then once we do that, Ken, is that when we can convey right away back to the homeowners?
That's the better time.
Okay, thanks.
Any, Laura?
I just have a comment on the, so if it's not necessary to have vehicles cross there, but we're doing it now, so where's the other place that you would get heavy machinery back there when we need to do that?
Go back to, so if we were not able to cross at location number 1, we could access the area north of that. We're going to have a maintenance driveway and gate here on High Grove Club. We'll also have a access point here at the active area. So to get to the area north of that crossing, we could use either of those 2 points. To get to the area south, we would either need to come in off Densmore. We did put another temporary pipe crossing at this location that I'm pointing to on the map. So it's a similar setup with a 20 feet long, a 48-inch pipe with riprap on it that construction vehicles can drive across right now. It does intend to come out once the project's completed. And as we get into phase 2, we would determine what that crossing looks like in the future. So that would be, currently that'd be a way to get to it is using that construction crossing. The other option is off of Lewis Road, which there's some topography issues when you come off Lewis Road to get up to the kind of that southern side of location 1. So there are 2 other ways to get to it. They're just not as direct.
And where are we with the hydrology study?
So we've gotten a draft back of, we had 3 tasks on that study. Task 1 was to lay out all the drainage basins and do some of the modeling. Task 2 was to identify areas for concepts for different types of stormwater features. And so we've gotten a draft of task 2 that we're reviewing right now. Task 3, after we present task 2 deliverables to you all, we would then propose to move forward with designing some of these features. So task 2 is just a concept of where those stormwater features could go. And so we've received that submittal and we're reviewing it right now.
So my only concern is when the hydrology, I mean, our goal is to bring this property back to a preserve, to its natural state, correct?
Right.
And is that right? So in doing that, using pipes and things like that, I would ask, is that, is that temporary, or are we going to eventually have water, in dry beds that, or with the boardwalks where it's actually, kind of doing what it's supposed to? I mean, that's just a statement that I'm making so that we don't conflict ourselves now with what we want to try to accomplish in the long run. That's just something to think about as we get the hydrology study and spend money in the short term that might be conflicted with the long-term goals. So I'm not sure what, I see the boardwalk, as a more, I mean, it's probably not as natural looking, but it lets the property return to its natural state. So just a thought. And then also, if we do go forward with the bridge and the fencing on top of it, I think the 4-board fencing is definitely overkill. I mean, if we're just trying to keep people from kind of falling off the side, you can do something really modified with a lot less lumber for less. Just a suggestion.
Not many horses.
That's good fencing for horses. I'm not sure we are worried about them getting their heads through. So.
Any other questions or comments or thoughts on this? I know you're looking for direction. I guess the question, and I apologize if you've already said it, if we didn't, what the cost would be. I guess bottom line, if we just added a boardwalk, correct, and went back to area 1 with a boardwalk, and then are you guys recommending strongly that area number 2 needs a boardwalk also?
Right. Area 2 that'd be the better long-term fix there to not have to address washout. So we would add a secondary boardwalk. It might be slightly less than the first one because it wouldn't need to be not quite as high as the other above the ground. Not sure how that would affect the price, but generally the 50-foot long boardwalk was $28,000. So.
Yep.
So what I would tell you is, if you look past the completion of all this work, we're talking about an area of the city that's going to be enjoyed by a lot of folks. Okay, so to me, we should be spending the appropriate amount of money to ensure that that use can be maintained in a reasonable fashion and we don't have interruptions or problems that we have to go back and address because maybe we didn't spend the right amount of money when we were doing all this work. So I'm in favor of you guys doing what you had suggested.
Okay. And I would just say to, if we did the pipe and the enhancements, I would recommend that we do make it look as nice as possible so that when it's done, kind of Joe's point, moving forward, when it's all done and mature, that it looks nice and like that's the way it was, designed to be. But other than that, it makes sense, the process here. So what's the rest of council's?
I agree.
Like, so the stone head wall, I missed that. Is that included in the,
You'd said about 12, you thought that would be about $12,000, but that would be included in the
Right,
It's
with,
included.
trade, so to speak.
yes.
Okay. And then, we would put some sort of vegetation down where there's just turned over dirt now?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, it would all be
That's what I'm
stabilized.
thinking too. It needs to be landscaped nice so that it looks,
Or just
kind of goes away
natural-
almost, natural look, yeah.
Natural, because right now, that was the comment that we got was it's
Yeah,
kind of an eyesore right now, which is understandable. So we're just trying to mediate that, and that head wall looked real nice. Take some away from the fencing and put it onto making it not be so stark. I know that riprap, it's like
Yeah.
blinding,
Mhm.
actually.
I do have one question. Are we committed to 4-board fencing there in various places? 'Cause
No,
Okay, I would advocate strongly for 3-board.
Okay.
It's much more environmentally and animal friendly. So just when that comes up.
okay.
Or even 2.
Huh?
Or even 2. They
Yeah.
can just do a small.
Yeah, no, I'm just talking about anywhere that people think. I just wish we had not gone down the 4-board path because it's problematic.
Okay, Rick?
I'd agree too, if we can use the stone instead of the riprap, because you're gonna have a nice, beautiful landscape area, more natural, but the riprap, like Laura had said, would stand out. It looks kind of harsh.
Okay. All right, thanks, Sarah.
Thanks.
Okay, Tammy, if you'll
Mayor,
turn it up.
our fifth item is discussion of craft beer and/or wine market license, business community feedback, and proposed revisions. It is presented by Ms. Bernadette Harville. And Mayor, just for the record, we do have a public comment on this after the presentation.
Okay.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight, we are here to discuss staff's recommended updates to the craft beer and/or wine market license under Chapter 4 of the Milton Code of Ordinances. Before you have the agenda, first I will go over some of the background as to why this item is before you. I will review a few pertinent definitions that will help clarify some of the items we will be discussing. We will then go over staff recommendations. We will discuss the feedback we have received from surveying Milton's business community on how these changes may impact them. We will talk about potential alternative action to staff recommendations. And then we will have some time to address any questions council may have about those recommendations and gather any feedback that you may have as well. The city has been approached with new business concepts that are currently restricted in Milton, though allowable by state law. These requests have primarily included consumption on premises in establishments that do not qualify as eating establishments or limited food service restaurants. You may recall that Sarah Ladart and Bob Buscemi presented this to council at the August 9th work session. Based on feedback from council, staff went back and surveyed the business community and made recommendations that will allow some of these concepts while continuing to prohibit bars. Rather than adding an additional license or establishment type, staff went back and reviewed what licenses were most like the concepts being requested. The limited tap license has been in the city since about 2017 and allows establishments to sell craft beer for on-premise consumption from 5 or fewer taps on site, and consumption is limited as there are hours that the establishment can serve and certain ounces that they can give each patron. The better fit we found was the craft beer and/or wine market license, as many of these establishments also wanted to have package sales, which aren't allowed under the limited tap license.
On June 1st, 2020, council approved the addition of several new qualifying establishments and license types, which included this craft beer and/or wine market license. The license currently allows establishments whose primary purpose is the package sale of craft beers and/or wine for consumption off premises to have limited consumption on premises. Again, hours are limited. And before we go into the required edits to accommodate the proposed concepts, I would like to go over some of the definitions to help explain some of these terms. First, we have the definition for bar, which would be equivalent to a ratio of 75 to 25 for consumption on premises of alcohol versus food sales. Again, bars are specifically prohibited in the city of Milton under Chapter 4. Craft beer, we're going to hear that a lot this evening. That is under the 2 licenses we have spoken about. And here you can see that it is beer brewed by independent brewers with a production of 6 million barrels or less annually. That is the definition of craft beer for several other cities, as well as when you look it up online. A crowler or growler is a glass, ceramic, or metal container holding 64 ounces or less that is sealed on site for consumption off premises. So it's just a different way to serve those packaged alcohol. Groceries will be mentioned in the recommendation from staff, so I wanted to include our proposed definition for this term, which would include saleable food products, including meat, dairy, vegetables, fruit, dry goods, and non-alcoholic beverages. Staff across finance, community development, and fire met to discuss the potential changes to the craft beer and/or wine market license that would accommodate some of the concepts that have been submitted. By adding language to include the combination of sales of craft beer and/or wine for consumption off premise with the sale of prepared food and/or groceries opens qualifications up to include most concept of smaller grocery type establishments that would also sell beer and/or wine by the package and for limited consumption on premises. This would also expand the concept beyond just having package stores with on-premise consumption. The second part of the edits would include clarification of the term primary purpose and ensure the establishment stays within the directive of prohibiting bars. As it stands, there is no clarifying language in the ordinance for this term under this license, and the recommended edits from staff would include an interior floor space of which 60% would be dedicated to support off-premises sales of beer and/or wine, food preparation, or grocery sales. In addition, 60% of gross sales would need to be derived from those retail sales for consumption off-premises, prepared food and meals, groceries, or any combination of those categories moving forward. Should these edits be approved, there are some fee-based changes that staff recommends to align closer to the intent of the license. The cost of an add-on would now be 40% of that, of what a standard consumption on premises establishment pays, and would be broken down by beer only, wine only, or both beer and wine like the other licenses. The establishment does not qualify for a standard consumption license, so we're removing the text that indicates that they also need to have that license. And as for Sunday sales, the establishment will be eligible for retail package sales on Sunday for the same price as any other retail package store and would not be eligible for Sunday consumption on premises. Per state law, you need to be a 50-50 establishment to have Sunday on-site consumption. Finally, we added language to mirror the limited tap license, which would require approval from the fire marshal and building official. We call this out specifically for limited consumption establishments as their non-traditional mixing of consumption on premises with other more traditional mercantile type establishments may put them in a category of assembly. And this helps ensure that both the applicant and staff are aware of the intended uses upon application instead of having to go back and revisit that. Per council's direction, staff surveyed existing Milton business owners that have an email address on file. This is part of the information we collect upon application for an occupational tax certificate, and we ask businesses to confirm them annually, so this was the best way to solicit feedback in the time frame we had. We sent out 768 emails on Friday, August 27th, and that campaign had a 43% open rate. The following week, we checked all the emails in the listing to the most recent listing that the finance department had and sent out an additional 206 emails, which had an open rate of 51%, which is a very good open rate according to our communications department. I also sent out an email directly to the 3 applicants that we have on hold pending potential changes that may allow their concepts into the city. And of the approximately 438 emails that were opened, we received feedback from 5 businesses, including 2 of the applicants on hold and 1 current license holder. 3 businesses, including 2 non-related establishments that don't have any alcohol license, were in favor of the proposed changes coming into the city of Milton. 2 were opposed, And this includes one applicant on hold who would like to see less restrictions on the 60/40 floor plan requirement, as well as one current license holder who felt that this criteria was too broad and against the spirit and intent of the current ordinance. We went back and looked at some alternative action. Of course, council has the choice to make any direction that they'd like to go in, but one of the alternatives we'd like to point out is the possibility of leaving it just as the package consumption only. And if you were to do so, we would just ask that you still include some clarification to the term primary purpose. As it stands, the term is understood to mean of first rank importance or value, and staff would like some level of clarification by which to administer that, including percentage of dedicated floor space and or sales devoted to that primary use. Again, this can be 60% or anything less that council deems would clarify and satisfy that first rank importance or value. So I'd like to open it up again, just to see if you guys have any questions or need any clarification.
Yes, first, I think, Tim, you said we have a
Absolutely.
We do, Mayor. We have
public
one public
comment on
comment.
that. So maybe if we can hear the public comment, and then that way may help with questions.
Certainly, I'd like to invite Mr. Corey Cianci. Hope I said that right, to the podium.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Council. My
And I
name's
might
Corey
just-
Cianci. We bought the Rock House right across the street, and we were planning on putting
And Mr. Cianci, just for the record, just name and address, just state your address for the
Corey
record.
Cianci, 6320 Keith Bridge Road, Gainesville, Georgia. I am a Milton graduate, though. So we bought the Rock House across the street, 12595 Crabapple Road. And our original plans would do strictly like a truck and tap or a beer garden. The city doesn't allow food trucks, so we went with the tap license that we thought was on file to do just a straight beer garden, but apparently they're desiring more off-premise sales, which we're fine with, but we don't see, and we hope I just saw the last slide, it looked like that you may be okay with the non-food. We have plenty of restaurants, the old Cans, which I guess they just changed the name, Campagna, Vintage Pizza. They all deliver very easily, like most of the breweries that you have in Roswell, Lawrenceville, Woodstock, they all get deliveries. So that's kind of what we'd be leaning more towards than just a straight 60/40, especially on the floor. Having 60% of the floor space taken up by groceries is not going to really work, and that it's only 1,200 square foot space. If we have to put 700 square feet of groceries in there, it's not going to make any sense for us. So that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that all our public here? Okay, so I'll
Yes, sir.
closing public comment. All right, open up to questions for Bernadette.
Go ahead.
Sorry. I was going to say, we sent out 900 emails. We got 300 and something replies. 300 and something opens, and only 5 people replied.
The people who were impacted certainly replied, which is good, but the people who maybe aren't impacted didn't choose to reply other than the 2.
Okay. Well,
So
we asked.
it would appear that the continuity here is for the particular establishment that is primarily a grocery store.
So what we're looking at, the current license is for a package store to be able to have limited consumption on premise. We're getting concepts, including other places that want to sell things other than just packaged alcohol, and it doesn't really account for that. And so we were proposing allowing a combination of package off-premise sales, so you could buy a bottle of wine, a package of beer. One of the concepts had specialty meats and dairy kind of things. You could buy that too, and then you can also maybe sit and have a glass of wine. That would be the concept of that we're seeing. So we were like, I don't know what we wanted to bring before you. Maybe that concept is saying, why restrict the sales of other items in addition to just packaged packaged alcohol from having the opportunity to do this? So this would allow for those concepts.
Okay, so my follow-up question then, this gentleman's concept, where does it fit in the spectrum of what they would like to accomplish?
So their concept is a little different than what we've seen before, but we do see, as Mr. Cianci mentioned, in other jurisdictions, is a place you can go and have a drink and bring in your own food. We don't currently have that in the city of Milton. One of the potential alternatives could be that you can include something like that to include space for eating food from other areas. But since we don't have food trucks and we just don't have a concept like that currently, and we met with Mr. Cianci and spoke with his business partner. And so that would definitely be an opportunity to expand this further. And we would just, if we were to do so, to make any changes, we would just withdraw the first presentation item tonight and go back to the drawing board and make a few more edits.
Is that a craft beer planned establishment?
Right, we spoke with Mr. Cianci and he said that he does have a plan, and I can let him come back up and speak, that would satisfy the other requirements, having the amount of 50 craft beers and or wines available, and some of the other restrictions of the time. He was fine with closing at 10 o'clock and things like that.
So how is craft beer and or wine not a bar if food is not predominantly served?
And that is traditionally how we've kept it. Now, again, going back to the definition of bar, it would be 75% is what the definition is staying away from. So we would still require that 20 or more than 25% of their other business come from something other than that consumption on premises. So there is still a restriction to preclude it from becoming a bar from the definition within the city.
Okay, and how would that play out? Like, that would be what? What would the 25% consist of?
Well, I will let Mr. Cianci speak on that since I don't know the business plan.
Okay, and then finally, what, not just regarding this gentleman, but across the spectrum, what does enforcement look like? How do we?
Currently, we would have, the enforcement would be the ability to audit sales to reach, if you put in a percentage. We have it in other license types in our ordinance, and we have the right to audit the books to ensure that, like, for example, the incidentals where they're giving a glass of wine at maybe the nail salon, they can't derive more than 2% of their revenues from purchasing that alcohol to give away. So it kind of limits it there, it limits how much you can give people. So that's how we've kept it in the past from places that don't have any food. The limited tap establishment has no food. The example we have is the bike shop on the corner. They have 5 beer taps and have bicycle sales and other mercantile type sales. The way it's contained with not being a bar is having only 48 ounces per person. You can do something like that in this type of establishment to ensure that they don't have more than that many drinks, and having the time requirements.
Peyton?
No, I think we've done a pretty good job over the years of loosening our restrictions. And, when the new concept comes in, I think we're pretty good about it, but I'm pretty firm when it comes to the food. I don't think we want a bar. I think other municipalities are the same way. So I think we can work with other concepts just fine.
Is that something, I know it was mentioned, the 60%. But then also, and I think to Carol's point, I think talking about package sales, like not consumption or whatever, but that would have to be over 25%. And then Mr. Cianci mentioned something about, having food brought in and whatnot. I'm just wondering if you guys are working together, if that's something that could be kind of brought in where part of that 60% say area is food, has to be used for food, consumption of food, that type of thing.
And we'll be happy to go back and address this concept and look at what we can do to fit into this model. When we had first started working on it, we did not have the full understanding of Mr. Cianci's proposal. So we'll be happy to go back and look at that, and we can withdraw that item if that's the direction.
What's the definition of the primary? What's the 60% has to be 6? Well, I know it's not 60%. We're proposing 60%, but 60% what?
So what we're proposing is to have 60% of the floor space devoted to supporting and showing that you are doing business activities other than consumption on premises. So that would include shelving, storage, the displays of groceries, or your packaged alcohol. Then you'd have the other 40% of the floor space for tables, chairs, and maybe a small place to drink at that you'd call a bar normally, but not a bar per the definition, right?
And that's designed to be able to keep it that retail location as opposed to a bar And that's the problem we've been running into because the floor plans we're seeing look like bars.
Yeah, and that's not the feel that we want to have here. But I will say that savvy, I guess what we're doing is the floor space is kind of for the savvy, right? Isn't that?
So we have two currently on hold, and that is
Okay.
one of them. And they have proposed, like I said, concepts that to us seemed that they would be fitting. When I spoke with community development, it was more appealing to have things other than just a package store that also had consumption on premises, but it had a package store that also sold dry goods, meats, dairy. That sounded like a concept that the city would get behind. And so that's why we put our heads together to propose that those would be included.
Now the brewery, is that something separate, I'm assuming, because are they doing food
A
or?
brewery is different. Now, a brew pub has a brew pub qualifies as an eating establishment, but a brewery does not. A brewery is a hybrid that is a unique circumstance where they do not have to have food, but they are manufacturing on site. So their primary purpose is typically the manufacturing, and then they have other restrictions from state law that keep how much they can serve and things like that.
And the one other thing, if I could add, is another way that we regulate all these establishments from turning into problematic bars is the limits on closing time. So we have pretty much across the board, I think we got them all at 10 o'clock now, or about to have them all at 10 o'clock. Generally, that will prevent that issue.
And under the warrants that are needed for the breweries and distilleries, there are further restrictions on those establishments set by the community development director.
Can you explain the warrants and the warrant process?
So the warrant process currently goes through community development. They review the proposal and ensure that it is fitting with what is going on in the community to make sure that there's not too many breweries and distilleries that go outside of what was anticipated. They can also, like I said, restrict. One of the ones we have over here currently is to ensure that there's no music, that there's no bright signage facing the residential side, things like that, that they can restrict further through a warrant process.
And of late, we've been bringing those warrants to council for your input. And we've been getting some valuable feedback from that.
Well, I'm not suggesting in the future that for every concept we need to amend our regulations. I think we'll have a bouquet of regulations and concepts can fit into our regulations. But for the intent and spirit of our speaker tonight, with limited floor space, without having the 60% dedicated to the other, how would that concept fit into Milton? How does that enterprise make money?
So the concern that was brought up is that when you walk into an establishment like that, there is the appearance of a bar. That was the concern of our current community development director, as well as what we've heard tonight. So that's why our proposal does not include that concept, but we'll be happy to go back and review it should that be something we would like to consider.
Well, again, I don't know that it's up to us to have regulations to accommodate everybody. At some level, new establishments need to accommodate the regulations, and I'm not singling anybody out. I'm trying to understand this, but if it doesn't fit, maybe there's a learning process to figure out how there can be a viable enterprise.
And I would agree. And I know it's tough, and there's a balance here because Milton wants to be different. We're progressive in some ways. You look at the bike shop, we allowed them to have taps, which is kind of a novel concept. And I know Crabapple in our downtown, in fact, we've already made a bunch of changes. And again, you don't want to make them too broad and then have unintended consequences. But I do like the fact that we have looked at a lot of things and all that. And I agree with Carol. It's not that you can change every ordinance because every applicant, or else the ordinances would totally be, different from start to finish. But, in this case, I would certainly, recommend from my perspective, if there's at least some more discussion on it, if there's some win-win kind of things that make sense for the city, but also for an applicant to have a new and, hopefully addition to the city of Milton and our citizens.
Yeah, I would say that I think we've done a good job in sort of keeping up with sort of the changes in what consumers are looking for, and keeping, our ordinance in line with what we want to be able to provide. We can't be everything to everybody. And let's face it, we've made a name for ourselves as the city who's got an idea on how we want to be, what we want to be, those types of things. And so, and we don't necessarily try to allow for everything. And I think we're doing a good job of making sure we stay current, that we open up our ordinances where we think it's appropriate, but I'm not compelled, or I don't think we should be compelled to solve every single problem. So.
So then what I would recommend is when you get to the first presentation item to decide whether we withdraw it and go back to looking at some alternatives to it, or you could approve it as is, and it would allow these concepts, the two of the three concepts we have on hold in at this time.
I don't think I'm hearing that, I don't think I'm hearing that they want to withdraw it.
Yeah, I was just saying the option at this point, just to make it clear.
And even if we can modify it,
Right.
even after the first read, as long as we don't entirely change it, correct?
It's, yeah, your charter has some rules upon when the council has to be confronted with a new code. And so, but it's not very different than other jurisdictions. I just don't want to see anything substantively or materially different that has not been the subject of what I call your bifurcated system, the first presentation followed by the public hearing. So as long as it's close, such that individual citizens have had a fair right to know what's coming through the system, I'm going to be okay with that.
So I guess that if there were some tweaks, or you guys come up with some other
Perfectly
ideas,
fine.
it's, a different percentage than a not, but not a,
But if it was
black
we
and
want a
white.
brand new concept to be tacked on, after the first presentation, that may present a bit of issue.
Yeah, I would like to move forward because I know some of these concepts, they've been like, their leases are signed and they're waiting on their permits. So.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Thank you. So we will move on to our first presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bernadette. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ready? Mayor, that first item is consideration of an ordinance to amend Chapter 4, Alcohol Beverage Licenses, and Appendix A of the Milton Code of Ordinance to update and clarify requirements for the craft beer and/or wine market license. It's agenda item number 21271. Our next first presentation item is the consideration of an ordinance of the mayor and council of the city of Milton, Georgia, to adopt amendments to the fiscal 2021 budget for each fund of the city of Milton, Georgia, amending the amounts shown in each budget as expenditures, amending the several items of revenue appropriations, prohibiting expenditures to exceed appropriations, and prohibiting expenditures to exceed actual funding available. Agenda item number 21272. And the final is consideration of an ordinance of the mayor and council of the city of Milton, Georgia, to adopt the fiscal 2022 budget for each fund of the city of Milton, Georgia, appropriating the several items of revenue appropriations, prohibiting expenditures to exceed appropriations, and prohibiting expenditures to exceed actual funding available. Agenda item number 21273. Mayor Lockwood.
Okay. Do I have a motion on the first presentation as read?
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve the first presentation as read.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion from Councilmember Jameson with a second by Councilmember Longoria. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous. Okay, we'll move on to our public hearing. If our clerk will please call that item.
The first item, consideration of an ordinance of the mayor and council of the city of Milton, Georgia, to adopt amendments to the fiscal 2021 budget for each fund of the city of Milton, Georgia, amending the amounts shown in each budget as expenditures, amending the several items of revenue appropriations, prohibiting expenditures to exceed appropriations, and prohibiting expenditures to exceed actual funding available. It's agenda item number 21272. Ms. Bernadette Harville.
Mayor and council, tonight we're here to discuss the proposed amendments to the fiscal year 2021 budget. The last amendments to this budget were approved on May 10th, 2021. And the current amendments before you represent adjustments resulting from current circumstances, opportunities, and recommendations from staff. Before you is a general fund budget summary. You will see the current anticipated revenues for FY 2021 at $34.7 million, including $1.65 million from the one-time transfer of CARES Act grant funding to reimburse the general fund for expenses incurred in FY 2020. There's an increase of $948,292 in projected revenues being proposed, which will result in a $35.6 million in general fund revenues for FY 2021. Moving on to the expenditure summary, you will see the current FY 2021 budget at $39.95 million with a proposed amendment in the amount of $7.8 million. That is not my right slide. I apologize. $38.95 million with an amendment of $605,419, resulting in $39.6 million in total expenditures for the year. Ending fund balance will be $9,182,040, and that will be putting the city in line with its required fund balance of 25% of the subsequent year's revenues. Next, we will move on to the detail revenue amendments. Before we begin there, I'd like to just mention that anytime the city has collections and occupational tax revenues higher than the prior year's collections, we are required to have a public hearing. We did advertise for it. We are not in that position this year, and I just wanted to point that out. For any reason, should the city collect more than it did last year, those funds would go towards fund balance to be used on non-recurring projects in future years. Here on the detail of the revenue amendments per line item, we have vehicle sales as they continue to exceed our projections. We have a corresponding increase of $150,000 to the ad valorem tax that is being requested to result in $1.5 million for that revenue line item. Along the same trend, consumer spending is also exceeding anticipations, and a request to increase this line item by $400,000 has been included in these amendments. Housing sales and related loans continue to yield higher revenues than anticipated, and staff is recommending an increase in the amount of $80,000 to intangible tax and $85,000 to real estate transfer tax. You will see requested increases to fines and forfeitures to account for the city's portion of related fines, as well as $64,428 being transferred in from the operating grant fund for staff time related to a grant that was awarded to the police department. We'll go over that award a little in detail later this evening. Here you have the total revenue adjustments, again, which tie back to that summary amount that we went over of $948,292. I'll be happy to stop here if anyone has any questions about the revenues before we move on to the expenditures.
Any questions? Okay.
So here we have the expenditure amounts broken down by department, which tie back again to that summary sheet. Many of the amendments correspond to the city's process related to employee benefit budgeting. Average anticipated healthcare costs are broken down by the number of eligible employees per department, and we true them up based on actual expenses at year end. So anytime you see the asterisks in the explanation column on the far right, that amendment is related to that true up process, and I won't go line by line through them. In addition to the employee benefit true up, there are requested amendments related to the city's Zoom license in the amount of $4,200. There are funds to cover the purchase of an envelope sorter for $3,486. And funding to cover Milton's share of the costs associated with the co-location of the Milton and Alpharetta courts on Highway 9 in the amount of $11,847 to go towards HVAC and electrical upgrades and some required furniture purchases. Finally, on this page, you'll see the recognition of funds from the Bulletproof Vest program being booked to the uniforms category. On the next page, you can see a request to reduce the Parks and Recreation and Economic Development salaries and wages and employee benefits categories by $80,000 and $16,500 respectively. Those are related to reorganizations of those departments that were approved earlier in the fiscal year, just recognizing the revenues or the expenses saved through those changes. There's also a request to decrease the professional fees category in community development by $40,000 related to the change in timing to updating the form-based codes for Crabapple and Deerfield. And then lastly, in the other financing uses, we are requesting to release unused contingency funds to be reallocated in FY 2022 and transferring $1,017,977 to the Capital Projects Fund, of which $17,977 will go towards the Police Department's Vehicle Replacement Reserve to recognize funding from the sale of surplus vehicles throughout the year, and $1 million to start the funding for the development of a new active park complex once a site has been identified by council. And with that, we have come to the end of the explanation of the expenditures. And again, you will see that total expenditures of $605,419 being requested and the total revenues over expenditures of $342,873, which will go towards fund balance. Next, we have the special revenue funds. The amendments in this packet consist of three of the funds. the Confiscated Assets Fund, the Operating Grant Fund, and the new American Rescue Plan Act Fund. Again, that is the fund that was created by the Department of Community Affairs and the State Auditor's Office to account for the funding we're receiving through the American Rescue Plan Act. Here we have the Confiscated Assets Fund. The adjustments in this fund are related to allocating a budget for eligible expenses that have been identified using confiscated assets for both federal and state funds. In the Operating Grant Fund, staff is requesting amendments to recognize revenues from the grant awarded to the Police Department through the Law Enforcement Mental Health and Wellness Act program, and related expenses across dues and fees, equipment, and a transfer out to the general fund for related staff time to participate in the training initiative for de-escalation for the Police Department. Here we have that American Rescue Plan Act, and we are still awaiting final guidance from the Department of Treasury before moving into the next phase of planning for these funds. So for the time being, we're proposing an amendment to recognize the revenues, which will be categorized as restricted fund balance until council has the opportunity to weigh in on a plan to spend those funds. To date, the only recommendation that staff has presented was to set aside funds in the 7-year capital improvement plan outlined in the FY 2022 proposed budget, which we'll go over in a little while, to construct a new active park complex with the funds that are recognized under the replacement of lost public sector revenues category. And that was outlined in the interim guidance. So again, once we have the final guidance, we will come before you with a proposed plan for you to approve before any of those dollars are spent. Here we have the capital project summaries. 4 of the capital projects funds have amendments within this packet. In the primary capital projects fund, there are amendments recognizing funding for water service improvements on the Northeast Crabapple Road project received through an approved IGA with Fulton County. Those funds are being transferred out to the T-SPLOS fund to be allocated to that project. You will also see the recognition of these funds being transferred in from the general fund and being allocated towards the police department's vehicle replacement reserve and the site improvements for construction of that new active park complex we just talked about. In addition, we are transferring funds from Providence Park account to the related grant accounts for that park under the trail project and Lake Pier construction, and updating the booking of the impact fees for the Cox Road purchase, which will allow staff to use a greater portion of impact fees on the turfing project that will occur next fiscal year. And finally, we are releasing unused contingency in this fund as well to be reallocated in FY 2022. The bottom line is total revenues over expenditures of $48,132, and that will go towards the fund balance. In the T-SPLOS fund, consumer spending is also impacting the city's share of related sales taxes, and an amendment of $415,000 is being requested. After recognizing the Fulton County IGA funding for water improvements at Northeast Crabapple Road project, the remaining fund balance will be restricted towards T-SPLOS eligible projects to be allocated once final bids are received in the Public Works Department and can be allocated towards those projects. In the Capital Grant Fund, Public Works has been awarded a new Local Maintenance and Improvement, or LMIG, grant for a Safety Action Plan spending in the amount of $116,000. That will go towards traffic calming initiatives identified as part of the Local Road Safety Plan and other related projects. You will also see the recognition of the city's share of those Providence Park-related grant projects that we just spoke about. And lastly, we have the Impact Fees Fund, where there's a request to recognize the transfer of funds related to the change in booking for the Cox Road purchase. Again, this will allow staff to use a greater portion of impact fees on a future project. That is the end of the FY 2021 amendments, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have about them.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Do we have any public comment?
We do not, Mayor.
Guess I'll close the hearing part of this. Okay. Okay, Tammy, if you'll please send the next item.
The second item is consideration of an ordinance of the Mayor and Council of the City of Milton, Georgia, to adopt the fiscal 2022 budget for each fund of the City of Milton, Georgia, appropriating the several items of revenue appropriations, prohibiting expenditures to exceed appropriations, and prohibiting expenditures to exceed actual funding available. It's agenda item number 21273. Ms. Bernadette Harville.
Okay, now we'll go over the proposed FY 2022 budget. This will cover revenue collections and spending from October 1, 2021 to September 30, 2022. Before we go into the presentation, I'd like to review the key dates that remain in the FY 2022 budget cycle. Tonight, we are here to hold the first of 2 public hearings on the proposed budget. You'll recall that we held a budget workshop on August 9th that went over the proposed budget at length. I will not go into that length of detail this evening. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to address anything that I may not cover again this evening, and any modifications that have occurred between that time and now will be highlighted during tonight's presentation. On September 20th, we will hold a second and final public hearing, and council will have a chance to vote and adopt a budget for fiscal year 2022. Before you is the consolidated budget summary, which shows all of the proposed budgets and includes anticipated citywide revenues in the amount of $53.3 million across the general fund, 4 special revenue funds, and 6 capital projects funds. And here we have the general fund budget summary, which we're used to seeing at this point, and that is where you can see the year-over-year revenue anticipations are projected to increase by 2.5%, excluding other financing sources. No requested revenues have changed since the budget workshop, but some of the variances to FY 2021 were updated through the amendment process that we just went over earlier this evening. There were no material variance changes, and when taking other financing sources into consideration, an overall 2.2% decrease is still forecasted. And the $1.7 million decrease in other financing sources, again, is the result of the recognition of revenues received through those one-time CARES Act funding and police department grants that will not reoccur in FY 2022. We went over the more significant revenue variances at the budget workshop, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have before we move on to expenditures if you wanted to go over the revenues once again. Okay, so moving on to the expenditures by department. These figures include the recommended salary adjustments that our Deputy City Manager, Stacey Inglis, went over at the last budget workshop. There have been some updates to the proposed FY 2022 expenditures of approximately $290,000, which include an increase to the employer share of the pension contributions to the defined benefit plan in the amount of $196,381 spread across the departments that have active employees in the plan. We looked at trying to get this plan to 100% funding, and this will get us there in 5 years by doing this plan as opposed to the 9% we've done in years past. And it's about 12% as compared to that 9%. There's $67,400 in the city clerk department to address document archival, which will extend into FY 2022, which we originally thought would be done by 9/30. So that is now recognizing those funds in 22 as opposed to 21. And $24,000 in municipal court to address software-related expenses to continue their ERP program. This brings the increase from 2021 to 2022 for continuing operations from 3% to 4%. And when you include contingency and new initiatives requests, that variance is 8.7% after the final FY 2020 amendments or 2021 amendments are taken into consideration. In the other financing uses section, you can see a drop of approximately $5.8 million as fund balance beyond required reserves and revenues received in excess of anticipations in FY 2021 were transferred to the Capital Projects Fund to fund the city's pay-as-you-go projects in the capital improvement plan. As a reminder, those transfers included funding to acquire land for a new active park facility, as well as starting to fund the construction of that facility, as we just went over. There was money to fund the local road safety plan, funding to address site improvements at the city's green space properties to get those open, and finally, funds to purchase a new fire apparatus that was part of the fire department's initiative to deploy a particular equipment in order to reduce staffing needs at this time. Again, these one-time transfers will not reoccur in 2022, resulting in the decrease that you're seeing here. In the end, the request will be balanced with the utilization of $1.1 million from the city's fund balance that is in excess of that is required by law. And again, I'll be happy to answer any questions on these variances before we move on to some of the other funds. So before you, we have the new initiatives. I will go over these in a little bit of detail since these are new items in addition to what's continuing operations for the city. And first, we have the 2 items that are related to human resources for the study that they have discovered where the police and fire department have incentives in other communities that attract and retain employees in positions for certified police officer and firefighter paramedics. As these are positions that we are seeing the most turnover under difficulty recruiting in, we are proposing these 2 initiatives. The first initiative is a referral fee program for the current staff who would recommend a certified police officer or paramedic that would get hired to the city and be paid out $250 at 90 days of employment and an additional $250 at the end of year one for a total of $500 for that referring employee. The second initiative is a sign-on incentive for those certified police officers or firefighter paramedics that get hired on and would be paid $2,000 at the end of field training in police and at the end of 3 months in fire, and then an additional $2,000 at the end of year one for a total of $4,000 per new hire within those positions. We have a request for a marketing and branding consultant in the equestrian marketing campaign that was created in direct response to strategic plan priority number 2, smart land planning, goal number 2, enhancing commercial nodes, as we work to complete the work by the CPAC and comprehensive planning process that's discussed the overall placemaking within the city. This consultant will help Milton identify proper marketing strategies to incorporate the goals of marketing and branding the city and establishing Milton as a location of choice for equestrian hobbyists, promoting the equestrian lifestyle, as well as drawing new businesses here. The next request is for a court bailiff. This position will replace a post-certified officer on court days, reducing the overall cost for that department for security while providing other services to court, including the ability to fingerprint on site. In the police department, they have a request for an asset control system, which will provide lockers with digital tracking to allow spare equipment such as laptops, radios, and tasers to be checked out and tracked. They've requested to reclassify the accreditation manager from a sergeant to a lieutenant, allowing them to take on additional command staff level responsibilities. They have requested a traffic enforcement personnel of 3 full-time employees. Those would go directly towards some of the traffic complaints we've had. They would only be dedicated directly towards traffic enforcement. Later in the evening, you will see the related vehicles related to that request in the capital initiatives. And there's also a request for field training officers training software, which would track their field training. In the fire department, we have a request for a public safety green space access. This again is for those ATVs and related gurneys that would help get anyone out of a dangerous situation with any of our green spaces. We have the Resilient Community Executive Training Initiative, which would include training through the Harvard Kennedy School of Government that will support preparedness and safe community goals outlined in the city's strategic plan as well as the fire department's strategic plan. We have the Blue Card Incident Command Certification, which will provide training to staff to ensure that all command staff on shifts are utilizing a standard vernacular that will enhance scene safety, effectiveness, and communication. We have a request for the accreditation from the Commission on Fire Accreditation International. Accreditation allows the department to ensure they're following best practices and adhering to those rules to ensure the best service for our community. Next, we have the GlideScope Go Video Endotracheal Intubation Laryngoscope. This is a tool, piece of equipment that the department would employ that would allow intubations to be done more often on first try as opposed to multiple tries, enhancing the outcomes of those patients. We have a request for the Milton Cares Paramedic Program staffing. Currently, this would be staffed through current employees. Is not a request for new employees, but just funding to pay those employees to do enhanced services throughout the community. They would follow up with patients and they'd foster relationships to improve healthcare outcomes throughout the city as part of the plans for this meeting the strategic plan initiatives for the fire department. Next, we have a request for the infrastructure inspector from the Public Works Department. Sarah Leaders and her team looked back at how much money we've been spending for infrastructure and or construction inspection. And we've been paying a third party to do that. And she believes we'll be able to save some money by bringing that in-house. Again, we will only be considering this should TSPLOS 2 be approved. So that's kind of, that has that contingency on it. We have a request for parking lot preservation. This would be a treatment that will extend the life of the parking lot facilities at Bell Memorial Park and the former Milton Country Club. And finally, we have the request for a development engineer. This would be bringing a part-time consultant position in-house as a full-time employee. That will be split 70-30 between community development and public works to address the engineering needs of both departments. So does anyone have any questions about the new initiatives being proposed?
Any questions?
We have our special events fund. Again, the slate of events is for FY 2022 is hoped to be full as opposed to some of the cancellations and delays that occurred in FY 2021, showing the increase in expenditures there of about $24,500. We did talk about the fact that The one hotel we have here in Milton still has not fully recovered from the impacts of the pandemic, so we are requesting to transfer in some funding, about $80,000 from the general fund to fund those activities. In the confiscated assets fund, again, we are not proposing any budgets. The restricted fund balance will be allocated once the department identifies qualifying expenses. The E911 fund, this is the fund that every time you have a phone or a cell phone, the city gets a tax on that. That money goes straight to the city of Alpharetta to fund our share of the E911 center and any capital expenses and personnel expenses related to running that center. The operating grant fund, again, the police department has that grant, which if it's not completed by 9:30, we will come back before you with a proposed amendment in 22 to allocate funding to continue that project. But as of now, we're proposing no budgets for this fund. That American Rescue Plan Act, we went over this in detail. This is the recognition of the second half of the funding that the city is due to receive in FY 2022. Again, once we have a proposed plan that the council has approved, we'll come back before you with an amendment to allocate that funding across the expenditure lines. Hotel Motel Tax Fund, that is the receiving of the money from the one hotel that we have. We are hopeful that they will start to continue to see a better increase in occupancy, but we're expecting maybe a $4,000 change between 21 and 22. Next, we have the capital projects funds. Here are our budget fund summaries, and you can see all the details of expenditures and revenues year over year and where that will leave us with each fund balance. And kind of what we normally look at from a closer angle is what we're spending our pay-as-you-go funding on. So as you can see right here, the dark gray column is what the city is proposing spending, the $6.759770 in transfer in from the general fund for the pay-as-you-go programming. It will cover vehicle replacement reserve for fire and police, an advanced life support system funding, so we can start funding towards the replacement of that system in the fire department. We have the bridge replacement program, gravel roads maintenance, pavement management, repair of major stormwater structures, the sidewalk and trail construction that will include trails throughout the city, public yard works improvements, the vehicle replacement reserve, also for public works and community development, as well as parks and recreation. And then improvements that we've outlined for Providence Park, Bell Memorial Park, starting to fund the replacement of the turf fields out there as they will need to be replaced in the next few given years. Completing some improvements at Cox Road, including that turfing and some potential tennis court installations. And then we have the former Milton Country Club, finishing the building enhancements and any of the active park improvements that have been approved by council. And then again, the build out of that new athletic complex that we're still identifying a property for. On the green space side, we have Birmingham Park, starting to fund the plan that we've seen for that park, including some improvements to the parking there, the trails, as well as some facilities for equestrian trail riding. And then the former Milton Country Club on the passive side, this is the funding for all those improvements that Sarah Leaders went over this evening, including the additional phasing of that plan. Lastly, we have the gateway and wayfinding signage throughout the city. These funds go towards the planning, design, and installation of the brand new signs. And then within the departments in the general fund would be any maintenance of those signage. Stop here if anyone has any questions about the pay-as-you-go program.
I just have a comment because I made the same comment in the budget review about the tennis courts at Cox Road. I still really support those tennis courts being consolidated and us finishing the plan at the Milton Country Club rather than, having some courts over there that are not, it does take a lot of oversight to keep the courts clean and ready for Alta teams. And so I still believe that we need to stick with the Milton Country Club plan first and foremost. So just my thought on that.
Okay, understood. And then finally this evening, just wanted to go back over for a moment the proposed capital initiatives. Again, here are the vehicles for those 3 traffic enforcement safety officers. We have a request for an auto pulse in the fire department. This is equipment that can be deployed to provide uninterrupted automated CPR, which is shown to improve outcomes in numerous clinical trials and will go towards the city's goal of increasing cardiac arrest survivability. We have the ATV that's related to that public safety green space access we talked about earlier. Improvements for the lower Birmingham traffic calming as you enter from the city of Alpharetta. This would be some medians and ways to calm traffic in that area and make it look more of like Milton, as opposed to what it looks like currently. And then lastly, we have improvements to the slope landscaping at the birdhouse. And currently it is a steep slope and we have a washaway and the trail that was going to be planned to go through there. This would enhance it with some tiered landscaping. So those are all the requests before you for the FY 2022 budget. And if anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to go over them. And again, we will have a second public hearing on this on the 20th.
Okay, questions or comments? Any public comment?
There are none, sir.
Okay, I'll close the hearing on that.
I just wanted, Mr. Mayor, the record to reflect, just because it's the budget, that the opening and the closing.
Okay. All right, so we don't have any items on our zonered agenda or unfinished business, so we'll move on to new business.
Mayor and members of the council, I will take this one. This is the approval of a final consent order involving an acquisition that did in fact go to condemnation, involving a roundabout at the intersection of Hopewell Road and Bethany Bend per the Open Meetings Act. Because this was, I believe it may have been discussed in executive, we do have to come out in open session and go over what's called the material terms of the acquisition, and your approval of this will allow us to then tender this consent order to the court. So the pertinent parties are two. It's Chase Bank, and then it is also Donald Stepanek. This is referencing parcel 4 of that acquisition, which was 0.063 acres of fee simple right-of-way and 0.031 acres of temporary construction easement. We had, with respect to just and adequate compensation, we had actually tendered into the court $73,100. And we have in fact accomplished the acquisition vis-a-vis the payment of $6,410 additional dollars for a total acquisition cost of $79,510. This consent order, once tendered, will authorize, well, first of all, it'll deposit that swing, the $6,410, and then it will allow the issuance of checks that will go to $29,076.81 will go to Chase Bank, $50,433.19 to Donald Stepanek, and that will encompass the full total of $79,510. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this is before you this evening for a approval of the consent order as I have framed it.
Okay. Any questions for Ken on that? Not, I'll open up for, do we have any public comment on that? Amy?
No, sir.
Okay, I'll close it here and open up for a motion.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve agenda item number 21-274.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion for approval from Councilmember Bentley with a second from Councilmember Morrig. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous. Okay, please.
The second item is consideration of the issuance of an alcohol beverage license for ancillary tasting to Rehan Liquors, Inc. It's doing business as Milton Package Store at 13093 Highway 9, Suite 1010 here in Milton. It's agenda item number 21275. Ms. Bernadette Harville.
Tonight you have before you an application for ancillary tasting license for the Milton Package Store, which is located in the Deerfield District between Kohl's and Target. They currently have a license, which was approved back in March, to sell beer, wine, and distilled spirits for consumption off premises, also known as retail package store, including Sunday sales. The ancillary tasting license has provisions which include limited hours and ounces per patron. They would be allowed to serve tastings from Monday through Saturday from 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. And this would be restricted to 2 ounces per sample of beer or wine and 1/2 ounce of liquor. And no patron will be allowed to consume more than 8 ounces of beer or wine or 2 ounces of liquor in any proportional combination in any 2-hour period. The applicant is in compliance and staff is recommending approval.
Okay, any questions on that?
I have a question.
Okay.
Do we have that license anywhere else in Milton?
We do. I would have to look back
Okay.
exactly where they are, but a tasting license, I know they've been active in establishments that are actually closed is what's coming to mind, but I know we've had them in the past. And it's typical that you'd be able to taste before you buy. And that's why it's so limited, to make sure it's not becoming a consumption on premises.
But isn't 8 ounces, I mean, isn't that like a big glass of wine?
Several tastes. I guess.
Yeah, regular,
We
it's 5
can-
ounces.
We are bringing before you
Plus.
additional changes to Chapter 4, so if that's something you'd like us to look into, I'd be happy to look into that.
That just seems very barish.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say, I don't think a tasting license is bad, but in a liquor store, I don't think that was probably our intent of that.
A prior iteration was beer and wine only. In the recent changes, it included distilled spirits that were approved, so again, we can certainly look at that as well.
And I would look at the quantity. Wine was what, 8 ounces?
Yes, currently it says no more than 8 ounces of beer or wine and 2 ounces of liquor
It's
in any
pour.
given 2 hours.
And it's a taste.
Well, then the people are just hanging around. That's weird.
It's a pour of
That's
There's not a
weird.
limit on how many, unlike on the other one, it was like 48 ounces. Is there a limit on
Well, that's
this?
the limit, no more than. So you have, okay, so
I would say, I
it's 2
think-
ounce samples
Yeah.
and no more than a
4
total of
ounces.
8 for beer and wine, and then half ounce samples and no more than a total of 2 ounces for liquor or the combination thereof.
But you could stay for 4 hours and have 16
I mean,
ounces.
So.
The
and
way
I-
it's currently written.
No, I'm not digging it.
Yeah, so, and the
I'm
enforcement.
just not
So
digging
the
it.
enforcement is the other thing that, that's a lot of ifs, ands, and, I mean, unless you have someone sitting there for a long, it's just an
I see
area
bar
that-
stools. It's
Yeah.
just weird. I don't know.
But,
It
but
has some
we're
other
talking about
requirements.
the approval of a license,
Yeah.
not the changing of our ordinance.
No, I just wanted to get clarification on what we're approving and then also bring up the fact that maybe we need to look at that.
And
as a
there's some
future-
restrictions to the floor space and where the counter can be and things like that that I can go pull up if you'd like me to. But again, we'd be happy to address any of these.
Rick had a question.
Yeah, is this standard for package store? I mean, I've seen tasting rooms in like craft beer and places like that. I don't know if I've ever seen inside a package store, a tasting.
I believe this tasting
Licensor
license has
room.
been with the city since the 2014 updates, if I remember correctly. I don't think this is one of the newer ones. The liquor part of it, I believe, is the newer piece of it. Everything we've pulled has been from surrounding communities that have things like this. So I would say that I don't know that it's typical, but it is seen other places is where we have found it. We didn't come up with this idea.
I've seen wine, wine tastings,
Yeah,
limited wine tastings in package stores.
yeah, I have too. And I think that's when, 8 ounce sounds like a lot, but they probably lay up to 4, 4 tastings of a wine. Any public comment on this?
I have none,
All
sir.
right, I'll close the hearing part and open up either more questions or a motion. Okay, does anybody have a motion? I'm going to make a motion.
Mayor, I move that we approve agenda item number 21-275.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Longoria with a second by Councilmember Jameson for approval. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. All those against say nay.
No.
Okay, that's all for approval with Councilmember Cookley, decline or nay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. So if Tammy, you'll please send the next item.
Mayor, that final item is consideration of a memorandum of understanding between the City of Milton and the City of Alpharetta to waive non-resident fees associated with football programming. It's agenda item number 21276. Mr. Tom McElveen.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. What you have before you is another MOU with the City of Alpharetta for your consideration. And this one is pertaining to football programming. But first, I wanted to go and kind of give you a history as to where we were and where we are now. Back in May, I came before you with an MOU including football, softball, and the therapeutic recreation summer camps, Camp Joyful Souls and Camp Happy Hearts. This was approved by you, but it was not presented or voted on by Alpharetta. So therefore, in June, Alpharetta approved an MOU for just the therapeutic recreation camps. I came before you on July 7th, and that MOU was approved. Where we are today, we still don't have the MOU for football or softball that we originally had in the original MOU. And this MOU that I'm presenting tonight already has been approved by Alpharetta. So this MOU with football, both Alpharetta and Milton, we utilize the same football program, NAFL, North Atlanta Football League. And it's operated essentially as one program now, but then we separate based upon the parks. So an Alpharetta Park team could play with an Alpharetta Park team. In this MOU, both residents of both cities would be considered residents, regardless of which park they're at and where they practice at, eliminating non-resident fees for Alpharetta residents in the Milton program or Milton residents in the Alpharetta program out of North Park. Currently, if someone's registered from Alpharetta here in the city of Milton, the program is charged the non-resident fee. And likewise, in Alpharetta, a Milton resident would be charged. This gives NAFL a little freedom as well, to be able to operate a little more seamlessly and program at the two parks without thinking, oh, well, if I put a Milton resident here in Bell Park, it saves on the non-resident fees. So it gives them a little more flexibility to get a better program to our residents. And we would have this go into effect this season. So the non-resident fees that we would bill would not be charged. There is a minimal fiscal impact to this MOU. The loss of non-resident fee collection. Back last year in 2020, there were 32 Alpharetta residents that played in the Milton program. That calculated out to $2,880. Outside of that loss, there's no transfer of fees back and forth as in the original MOU where we would square up at the end. That is not part of this MOU at all. Questions?
I just got one question. So is this MOU, I guess, are these more on an annual basis where every year we have to be doing this?
They auto renew.
They do?
It does.
It might be just a suggestion for future for all these for these programs to understand how to operate, to maybe go in maybe a 3-year deals and stuff. So we're not seeing this every single year and we're negotiating back and forth. And it's just, I think it's much easier if that would be an option at some point in the future. So
the intent's not to go back and forth. We will meet, but
it did it this year. So
Okay, we can look at that. See if it's
just
legal.
to be an
Sometimes
option, just to take a look.
certain contracts you can't.
Yeah.
The government can't go over a year. Okay.
Yeah, intergovernmental agreements in the Georgia Constitution can go 50 years.
Okay. good.
Yeah, I would maybe on a lot of these, maybe
Not
let's
recommended.
start. No, but I mean, as we go through this with Alfreda and stuff and
course
other
not.
places, the longer term, I think we have the better.
Something to
So,
review. All right. I'll, no more questions. I'll open up for a motion. Oh, and I'm sorry. Do we have any public comment?
We do not, Mayor.
All right, I'll close the hearing and then open up for motion.
Mayor, I move that we approve agenda item number 21-276.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Longoria with a second from Councilmember Morig. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous. And I think Councilmember Cookley did not vote on that.
Thank you,
Tammy, just
Mayor.
FYI. All right. Move on to reports. Is there anything council would like to report on? If not, we'll move into.
I'd like to bring up, if we could maybe get an update on where we are with the, starting with initiative to move elections or design elections to do within the city of Milton, and tell us what you need from us actually to get that rolling, to actually formalize it.
An email.
So my proposal, as you all know, is to create a committee, 2 members of staff. I would likely put Stacy in the lead of that. Probably Tammy also is in that committee. 2 members of council and 2 knowledgeable members of the community chosen by council. The reason I think it's important to have some members of the community. First of all, many hands make less work. Plus, they can now potentially get more people involved at maybe in subgroups and lower levels. At the same time, Alpharetta has discussed creating a multi-city look at the same thing. Obviously, we could, if we could get involved with something like that, and we would move both of these committees concurrently, And if we're able to do something like that, we'd be able to spread the fixed costs across all of the cities, like the machines and things like that. If we were to go electronic, getting a little ahead of ourselves, but the city probably wouldn't be able to afford those machines. Nonetheless, these committees could work through those things and determine exactly how they want to present it back to council, exactly see what you want to see. Really, at this point, I'm waiting on council to give me the go ahead to start moving on this.
Right. And I know there's been a couple council members expressed interest in serving from the council side, and then again, would have to pick the citizen side. So, okay. All right. I guess Sarah, Public Works. Been up here quite a while tonight.
We're competing.
All right, good evening again. It's been a couple months since I've presented to you, so I've got lots of updates to share for Public Works. First, on the maintenance side, we're in our final round of the street sweeping. That it was a fiscal year 21 program. We're looking to rebid that for fiscal 22 with some extensions available, so it's a multi-year contract. So it's been very successful in sweeping the collector roads and the state routes with curb and gutter and medians. T-Splosh signage, we recently installed a new type of signage at upcoming intersections. With Greg and communications help, designed this topper that just attaches to the front of the sign. So as the project starts, we can take that off. But it's a good way to demonstrate the projects that are in the works to be funded with T-Splosh. Getting ready to start our annual stormwater inspections. Every year we have to inspect 20% of our inventory, so that's about to kick off. And I pulled the number of work orders just in the last about week. We've completed 31 work orders. So next update, I'll have a monthly number for you, but that's a good start to the month of September. These are some upcoming contracts. Several of these are planned for the next meeting. The Lackey Road property, looking at that dam, doing an evaluation, and then potential for some repair plans depending on what comes out of that study. We're still in the procurement phase of the local road safety plan. We sent some shortlist requests to the consultants that responded on that. So we're in final evaluation to select a consultant for the local road safety plan. You'll see the Morris Road final design contract coming before you. That's a continuation with the consultant that did the preliminary work. So to be able to move into right-of-way and final design on Morris Road widening. Working on a contract for New Bullpen Road Bridge. We're hoping to do a bridge deck rehabilitation, but initially in talking with a bridge consultant, they suggested we do an inspection and assessment first before we invest any into that bridge. So we have that contract being prepared. Pavement markings, as part of Bernadette mentioned in the budget, we have a safety action plan grant from GDOT. And part of that will fund some pavement markings. So we're getting ready to award that contract so we can then get reimbursed from GDOT for those raised pavement markings as well as some striping. And finally, our traffic signal maintenance, that's an on-call contractor that's available for any signal issues. So all these things are upcoming. We're working on finalizing the contracts. Some recent contracts, I believe in July, we did a contract for some gateway signage replacement. That was at Birmingham Highway entering the city, Broadwell Road, and then State Route 9 at Webb Road. Just wanted to show you the picture of the before sign and then the newly refurbished sign. So our facilities manager led that request to get quotes for the new signs and get those installed. We also updated the painting on the fencing. The City Hall server room backup AC, I believe at the last council meeting that was approved, and we're getting ready to get that installed this week. City Hall generator is on order. It's several months out before the equipment comes in and we can get that project going. Bethany Green sinkhole, this was a repair project within the roadway. The contract was awarded, I believe, at the last meeting, and then got that work completed just last week. Then on tonight's agenda, we had the stormwater pipelining that's in the Brookshade subdivision. I wanted to show a picture of, we had some camera work done inside that piping system, and the rust line of the metal pipe you can see on the picture. So what this project will do is it provides a cured in place lining. So it's like a sock that goes inside the pipe and allows it to maintain the water flow without having to completely tear up and replace the pipe. So that project will be kicking off after it was approved tonight. And then we have construction inspection to close out the 2 roundabout projects, Hopewell-Hamby, Hopewell-Thompson, and the Cogburn sidewalks. So just some final closeout inspection work. So those change order to task orders were approved tonight. And then jumping into some projects, State Route 140 at Green, we did get comments back from GDOT District 7. We're working to address those comments on the traffic engineering study and the concept layout. On tonight's agenda, we had the survey to begin collecting data to be able to lay out those improvements once DOT approves the concept. The 372 Crabapple Road Birmingham Highway repaving that's the GDOT project that's near completion. And as part of that, with the rework of 372 at Green, we are preparing to do a survey to collect the actual pavement lines where they exist and to be able to further coordinate future improvements with GDOT. That's our partnership in the project, is being able to get that survey, and then DOT is going to reinitiate discussions of a future improvement there. Birmingham Road Middle Bridge, we've been collecting survey data there so we can finish design and determine right-of-way impacts and start moving forward on that project. Freemanville at Birmingham, ready to begin right-of-way acquisition on that project. Mayfield Road sidewalk, that is connecting Lakeside Park to Freemanville Road. We're working on preliminary design for that project. And then the long-awaited Hopewell at Bethany has kicked off. The first 2 pictures are the demolition of the house directly across from Bethany Bend. The image on the right there is the roundabout overlaid with the aerial, so you can see how close the house was to the proposed roadway. And then the bottom 2 pictures are the tree clearing that started on that project. Like I said, last time I came to you all was in July, and I showed you the picture on the left of Hopewell and Thompson, and then the success of our 1-month detour there. The picture on the right was taken in early August, showing the nearly completed roundabout. And finally, an overview of that one as well. These are very neat to see from the aerial viewpoint of the nearly completed. I would just have some final closeout. There's a few drainage issues to address, but these are functioning very well. And that is my update for tonight.
Okay. Questions?
Yeah, just a couple quick questions. From a funding standpoint, I know we're going to be voting on T-Splosh coming up soon. Have we been able to fund most of these roundabout and road improvements with the T-Splosh funds?
We are. We're doing very well on our, all of our projects have come in under our projected numbers. While the revenues have been 85 to 90% of what was projected, our projects are all coming in within the budgets that we set for those.
That's great. And when do you expect to be doing the Highway 9 street sweeping? And the reason I ask the question is we've got some maintenance issues with some of the property owners along the way where we've got grass and clumps of grass growing out into the Highway 9. And I know just doing the street sweeping won't take care of that. So I'm just wondering from a timing standpoint, when do we need to work with the property owners, make sure that they do their part first?
That's not Sarah's.
Okay.
So Bernadette is working with, currently with our code enforcement. We have a plan that we're going to be bringing before council that will hold the property owners accountable, mostly the commercial, that corridor commercial. It's a little more involved than we thought, but the problem is there are some businesses down there that are not as responsive, some that are no longer there, but they're still owned by somebody. And their lack of responsiveness is causing what you're seeing. And what we are planning on bringing before you is is an ordinance change that will allow us, once we go through certain processes, which will involve going before court as well, to be able to go and remediate the situation ourselves after we go through all the processes, and then charge the owner of the property for the work that was done, because there's just some properties we're not getting much responsiveness on. But in addition to that, there is Bernadette has a flow chart that would probably take up that window of exactly how we're going to manage the new Highway 9 corridor maintenance plan. We'll get that out to you as soon as we have that solidified.
Thank you.
Sarah, quick question. Did I see a sign, a T-Splosh sign at Providence and Bethany?
Yes.
Okay, can you tell us what's going on there? Is that an additional turn lane or?
So we started with a concept contract back in this spring. Had a consultant come in that did traffic counts just before school got out, did some modeling, ran a few different improvement alternatives, sent letters out to all the potentially impacted property owners and offered a stakeholder meeting this was grouped with 2 other intersections. So we had a meeting for those 3. I believe that was in early August, late July. We held that meeting. Then we did a general public survey for feedback on the proposed improvements. We're proposing a roundabout at that location, and we're looking to bring forward a discussion of the concepts at an upcoming meeting in the next couple weeks.
And one last question. Roundabout at Freemanville and Birmingham Road, do we have a kind of estimated time on when we think we're going to start on that or finalize plans?
So the plans are finalized. We have right-of-way plans. Of course, as we start right-of-way negotiation, there could be some minor changes to the plans as we work through that. So we are just preparing to start right-of-way acquisition now. Anticipate 6 to 8 months for right-of-way acquisition, and then we'll have the plans bid for construction.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Next will be fire with Matt. Thank you, Matt.
Good evening. I'm going to be pinch hitting for the chief tonight. Which one is mine? I just lost my screen. Let me start off really quick with an aside about my informal attire that I've worn in front of you along with Battalion Chief Bushman. This is part of the 9/11 honor, I guess, that our fire department's paying in the 20th anniversary. So we were able to donate to the First Responder Foundation equivalent in New York and get a commemorative T-shirt. And so the fire department is allowed to wear these commemorative T-shirts for the month of September in honor of the 20th anniversary and the 343 firefighters that lost their lives that night. So really quick, I wanted to run through how our stats are trending for the year. We're seeing significant call volume increase over previous years. My first thought when I saw 2021 and I compared it to 2020 is, well, last year was a slow year. But if you also look back at 2019 and 2018, you're seeing a similar 1,800 number. And that's year to date. That's January through August 31st. So we're seeing about a 20-30% increase in calls that we're handling in the fire department this year. Just for a really quick breakdown of what that looks like, again, keeping with how things usually are in the fire service, 45% of those are EMS calls. 2.6% of them are fire calls, but you'll see later. Those were fairly significant calls. This is what's called a heat map. It shows you basically where our calls are. And as you would expect, it's in the Crabapple and Highway 9 area is primarily where we're responding to. And we also had very large fires at IMT Deerfield and Camden at Deerfield. This picture is from IMT Deerfield. They happened on the same weekend. Both of them were from lightning strikes, and the one at IMT suffered a complete collapse inside the structure. So that was quite an event, and we were strongly supported by our mutual aid partners in Roswell, Alpharetta, Forsyth County. The outside jurisdictions had to come in and sit at our fire stations for the hours that we were there. Fire crews worked really hard over this past couple of months. Other activity, some other major benchmark activity is also turning up in 2021, including, again, January through August, 1104 inspections or plan reviews conducted by the fire department, which is double pretty much what we did the previous year. And then pre-planned business visits where our firefighters go out and actually visit the business so they know what it looks like before they have to respond in an emergency is 300. So that number has increased significantly now. 2020 also was short because of the COVID pandemic and the shutdowns and everything. It wasn't a good idea to have healthcare personnel randomly visiting businesses throughout the city while the community was shut down. So we've also had some internal staff changes. Actually, in my shop, I'm the deputy chief of administration, so there's been some change in my organization. Deputy Fire Marshal Johnny Gomez was appointed. He was previously the logistics officer. That's Captain Gomez. If you see him out and about, he's also one of our fire clowns and loves the public education. So the fire marshal's office is a perfect location for him. Andrew Kennedy, one of our operations captains, was appointed as the logistics officer. And as of yesterday, we have a new medical services officer overseeing our EMS program, Captain Mark Haskins. And then finally, Captain Scott Wright, who's retired from Fulton County and then spent a career with us since 2007, has now retired from the city of Milton as well. So we wish him the best in the future, and it's quite a lot of experience that we're going to have to replace some big shoes. Another update, Truck 41 is moving out of Station 81 in September. It's been co-located with Alpharetta Engine 81 since 2008. And as part of our new station completion and the relocation of all our apparatus, as we've discussed at previous council meetings, they'll actually be moving out. Our plan right now is to put them over in this area at Station 41 eventually, once Station 42 reopens. And that will provide a ladder first due service to this area, which is really important because we're putting in some taller buildings in this area. And being able to get high up on those buildings is critical to providing service. And then the last thing I have is that we've, since I want to say June, July, when the first ones came, we've hosted 4 Harvard Fellows, a group of 2, and then 2 individuals from Deaconess Beth Israel Hospital and Harvard in disaster medicine. They've done a field rotation at Milton Fire Rescue. They embed with our firefighters. They stay at the station. They respond to calls in the middle of the night. And then we tour them around. They get to visit public health. They get to see how ambulance services and EMS is provided at the local level. And it's actually really exciting to be a part of that program and have that interchange with those people when they come down. And get a little bit of experience of what it is to be a firefighter. So we taught them how to breathe air and drag a hose line. And also the other picture is visiting the it's Mercedes-Benz Stadium. I was going to say Georgia World Congress Center. They were visiting Mercedes-Benz Stadium back when they had the mass vaccination site, and got to talk to the doctors down there that work for the National Guard, and we're putting that program on. So far, the reviews of this program from the Harvard Fellows have been very positive. So I think this will be an ongoing relationship that we have with them in the future. And that's all I have for the fire department, unless you all have any questions.
I think we're good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, I think next we added by motion and approval to our agenda to adjourn into executive session to discuss land acquisition, potential litigation, and personnel.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Longoria, second by Councilmember Moore. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous. Aye. That was unanimous. Let me make sure I need to have Tammy.